What's up, everybody? Welcome to the VSM Real Estate Podcast, getting you closer to massively successful people in the Twin Cities real estate market. I'm your host, Andre Anderson, today joined by Ryan Schroeder.
Hey.
And our guest, Cindy Koebele, founder of TitleSmart.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's fun to be here.
This will probably be the biggest celebrity we have on the podcast this year.
For sure. Yes.
That's a sad story.
Yeah. Sure is.
Well, for everybody that doesn't know you, I'm pretty sure everybody does know you, but for those that don't, could you maybe kind of introduce yourself, what TitleSmart is, and kind of how you got started?
Certainly. So I'm Cindy Koebele, the owner of TitleSmart, and we are a title company. So we do the title searches, we make the requirements as to what would be needed for a proper title transfer, and then we execute that and provide the settlement between the parties, exchange the money, record the transfer, that type of stuff. And as a title insurance company, we're actually insuring the title and issuing a policy that a customer could file a claim on if something came up later.
Sure. How would you say TitleSmart differentiates itself from the competition? Because I can give an opinion on that, but I'm curious to see how you feel you guys stand out amongst a sea of options.
Oh, you got an hour?
Yeah?
Yeah.
No, we got 1 minute.
Yeah, okay. All right, 1 minute.
Was the elevator speech.
So, well, I like to say that we provide an extraordinary or an extraordinary experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had somebody who emailed me yesterday, one of our vendors who does all of our furniture. And she said, after doing all of your spaces and being in your office so many times, I just had a closing at another company the other day, which was a failed thing she sent me, by the way. Oh. And she says, when I was in there, I realized immediately that what you guys are providing was definitely several steps up from the competition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yep, that is the goal. We want you to come in here. We want you to feel like, okay, I can relax and I can enjoy the moment of buying a house.
I would agree that it's like the normal transaction, but done at a higher level. So every experience that I've had with TitleSmart, your closers are a cut above the rest with the competition as far as their knowledge and professionalism. The experience when you're there, everything from the cleanliness to the gifts that you're providing on the table to the cookies and coffee and everything. It's just the ambiance, everything is just like another level above your competition. And that's a big reason why I continue to work with TitleSmart. So
it's all those little things that make
is.
such a big difference.
Isn't that one of your slogans? It's the little things or something? So,
yep. And every time I hear it, I'm like, my ears perk up. Somebody said my thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. Every single time that I go to TitleSmart for a closing, I'm like, this is definitely going to be just a great experience, for not only us, but like our customers and clients and everything like that. So
I had to work with a different title company for a double sale or double closing transaction about a month and a half ago. And it was such a train wreck. Not only would they refuse to come to me, which I've gotten accustomed to certain things. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, when I went there to their location in St. Louis Park, which isn't exactly close to me, I had to wait for 1 hour and 45 minutes for a correct settlement statement because she kept getting it wrong and double charging fees and all this kind of stuff. And then she tried to get me to sign a piece of paper saying that I received 1099 proceeds that I didn't receive, and I refused to sign it, and it was a big debacle. And by the time I was done with the closing, I ended up having to call my ex-wife to pick up my son because there was no way I was going to make it across town in rush hour to pick him up. So I was irate, and I laid into them a little bit, and all I could think about is this would have never happened with TitleSmart.
Right. I would be like, just sign this, and you're like, okay. Yeah. Well, because there's a trust level there, too.
That's true.
And
it's reciprocal trust, too. If I tell you I'm going to do something, you know it, too. So
yeah. That's important. It really is.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you decide to get into the title industry then and start TitleSmart?
Well, those are two whole different little avenues.
Let's start at TitleSmart because I know you've been in the title business prior to that. So.
Yeah, so I was in the business for, 20-some years, and I was working for another title company, running it for them. I was vice president. And we had built it to 6 offices, and the ownership was starting to shift. Things were getting a little weird with the owner group. So I thought, well, gosh, I've been doing this for a while. I can just do it for myself. Mm-hmm. So I just woke up one day and I'm like, okay, I'm going to start my own title company. I told my sister and she's like, what? I don't want to leave. I'm really happy. And I go, well, it's just what we're going to do. And she's like, okay. So then we just went out. I incorporated the business and 60 days later we were open.
Was that 2007?
Yeah. So it was like the worst time in the year ever that you could open a company. And we really had no money. I had to borrow $30,000 from my mom. And we rented this little tiny 1,000 square foot space upstairs, which was a problem if you have somebody with handicaps. But at the time, we were just like desperate and wanted to, refurbished computers and, little tiny modem and small network. And we opened up and then we're like, where's the business? Because literally the bottom completely fell out of the market, or the housing bubble burst.
Yeah.
So we just...
So early on, did you go after more of that foreclosure business at all, or through the banks, or was it always kind of coming through the realtors?
Mostly through the realtors. I didn't do any bank-owned transactions except for the few that filtered through from our realtors, but I did a lot of short sales.
Okay. Yeah.
And, everybody at the time was like, oh, yeah, we can do these short sales after a sheriff's sale, which had never really been heard of before. But we pioneered it and got really good at it, and did a lot of those over the next 3 years until things leveled out.
Yeah.
But
awesome.
yeah, it was really just one customer at a time.
Everybody, you mentioned that you started your business in the Great Recession, and obviously, as you know, so did I. In some ways, I still think it might have been the best time to start a business, because it was like it's just really been ascending ever since. You know, like everything has kind of worked out for us in terms of market conditions. It's only gotten better every year.
Yes. Plus, you didn't have this huge payroll and all these leases on all these buildings, and you could just kind of.
And people were willing to work for less back in the Great Recession too. You know, there wasn't that what I feel is kind of an entitlement issue nowadays, where people are so well paid and comfortable that they don't want to try as hard. People were fighting for their lives back then.
Right, and less talent just applying for jobs right now with this great economy.
Yeah, totally agree.
So I do see that, yes. But, it's surreal. There's days I walk around the office and I'm like, what? This is like serious company. What happened? So
I can imagine. Yeah. Every time I go to, your main headquarters there, I'm just like, wow, look at all these people and cubes and how big it's gotten and everything. You've done differently than I. You focused on one thing, whereas I kind of had entrepreneurial ADD and went all over the place. So.
And I do like to dabble, but my husband's always like reeling me back in.
Stay focused.
He always gives me this little talk that says, do you want to do 10 things okay or one thing really, really great?
Right.
And I'm like, well, I want to do both.
I want to do 10 things great. Where's there C, all of the above?
I do. I can do both. But then, all of a sudden it'll get really busy and I'm like, okay, I got to push all this stuff aside for a while and just focus on my main business. And then, if you're not giving your 100% to everything, you're not going to get that 100% back.
That's probably a great segue into one of the questions or one of the topics here in your book.
Yeah, for sure. So in your book, you kind of describe how important and how much of a cornerstone building good connections, genuine connections, and relationships are. Could you kind of describe your philosophy on that?
Well, my philosophy is that it's all about relationships, and friends help friends. And I get a lot of different vendors that are approaching me and wanting to sell me this product or that product. And I feel like it's their responsibility to find a way, and I don't care how they do it, but they need to find a way to break the barrier and make a connection with me and build a relationship. It shouldn't be just assumed that they're going to pick up the phone and I'm going to order something from them. And a lot of people will be like, oh, well, we want to sell you this, we want to sell you that. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. I have a really solid relationship with my bank or with my furniture company. And unless something goes wrong with that, that's firm. Mm-hmm. And so by building those relationships with your clients, that's just going to lead to that.
So how did you build the relationships with your realtor network? Because that's where you're getting your business.
One relationship at a time. Yeah, so it's really a little bit like, okay, I did a closing. I did a great job. And then the customer saw the work that I was doing, the real estate agent, and then called me after the fact and said, I'd like a closing like that. So then we did a transaction together, and then they referred me to somebody else in their office, and then I built that relationship. And then just genuinely listening and paying attention to the details. Like sometimes I will go out to a closing and I'm going to see one of my realtors there, and I will bring something from my trinket stash that I know that his wife likes. And that just goes a long way.
Sure. One thing I've noticed about TitleSmart is when I first started, I was doing closings with you, and then I had probably about 4 different closers over the years, but there's never been like that drop off in quality. How are you able to attract and retain talent in such a competitive environment?
I'm picky. Well, you have to lead by example. So I always make sure that I'm walking the walk. And even the other day, somebody's like, why do you park way back here? And I'm like, because I ask everybody else to park way back here, so I need to do the same. And so when people see me walking the walk with the customer, they want to do that too.
I've always been impressed. Whenever I send you an email, you seem to respond within 10 minutes, often within 5 minutes. I don't know how you...
Or 5 seconds.
Yeah, you're like... I've had times where I see like 0 minutes ago on the reply. I'm like, geez, that was insane. So yeah, you definitely have that customer service, ready to serve type of attitude. And I think that's always been a big factor for me too, where when you're dealing with a vendor who you're giving business to, you want to be treated like the customer and want to be treated like you're important, not that you're leading the transaction and you're trying to follow up and hold them accountable to their role. And so I think you guys do a great job with that as well.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I did a whole chapter in my book about that. I mean, the chapters are short, but it's response is everything. So I get a little OCD about that. But like right now, I'm doing this podcast, so I won't be responding to any emails or text messages until I get out. But
does that give you anxiety?
Not really, but I will respond right away when I have a free minute, and it may not be the huge answer they're looking for, but it'll be like, oh, got it, I'll take care of this, or yep, thank you, just a quick little response so they know it's off their plate and onto mine.
Yeah, and sometimes people don't do that, and you're the other person, like if you're on the kind of like the receiving end, or you sent it, and you're like, oh, did they get it?
Yeah.
Now you're kind of getting anxiety.
Yeah, it's like at least tell me to, go take a hike, but don't just not respond to my email. Response means I'm not important. You don't care about responding back.
Right.
No response.
I get the feeling with the other title company that I mentioned earlier, when I was following up 2 weeks, a week, 3 days before closing, asking about the settlement statement and stuff like that, that it just would have never gotten done had I not pressed the issue. And so that was such a bizarre experience for me, because typically, whether it's, Maria or Natalie or Amber or anybody I've worked with over there, I kind of get to be the lazy slouch, and then they're the ones saying, hey, I need this, and here's where we're doing your closing, here's where you need to be. The leadership in the transaction is huge. Like, that's certainly the expectation on us when we're functioning as a realtor. We're not waiting for the customers to ask us, hey, are we going to do an inspection and what's up with the appraisal? Like, we should be telling them, here are the milestones. So.
Well, and think of the missed opportunity from that other title company. Because here they had an agent that they were working with on a transaction that they just kind of blew off and just dragged their feet on everything. Now, if they would have went in there and just blown you away, you might have been like, wow, there's 2 good title companies around. But they, missed opportunity. And that's where I'm like, hey, closers, you got a new agent. First time you're working with them, you got to blow it out of the water every time, but you got to really blow it out of water this time.
For sure.
Because that can create a residual relationship.
First impressions are huge. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Andre and I have heard that's kind of coming around the pike in the title industry is the whole e-sign and e-notarization here. That's pretty wild. Tell us about that and how you think it'll affect things.
It's here. I mean, I could do one today if I needed to, and I'm looking for the perfect test case. So we'll see if you've got something. I mean, ideally, I would like to do my first e-notary, e-signing with somebody who's, like a veteran or something out of state. But it doesn't have to be that way. But I have a platform now that I'm all registered with. And so with Minnesota, your notary has to be a Minnesota notary. And so that took a little while because a lot of the title companies are still saying, well, I don't want my closers responsible for that, But the platform is really nice because basically I can set up all of my documents in this system and I can apply all of the signature notary tags. And I think it's very similar to how do you guys do your purchase agreements in DocuSign. And then I can invite whoever I want into that session. And then when the customer logs in, there's a whole vetting process of questions that come like from the credit bureau to verify their identity,
Nice.
and their ID gets scanned. And then once they've completed that process, then it connects the notary, me, or the closer to them. And then they've got this live session. And the realtor could even be in on it or somebody else. And then you just go through one at a time. I push them the document. I can say, this is your warranty deed that you're signing, Here's where you're going to sign. And then they push it back to me. I notarize it, and then I push them the next document. And all of our metro area counties are set up to accept these documents now. And here's the funny thing. Sorry to talk so long, but
Oh, no, go ahead.
when the statute first came out, there was a company in Virginia that was doing these Virginia notaries. And so there was a little bit of speculation, and people were wondering, what they could do with that. But then once the Minnesota statute passed and said that it had to be a Minnesota notary, that kind of pushed them off the map. Then all the title companies were talking about it, and through like the Minnesota Land Title Association and American Land Title Association, and they were saying, this is how we're going to handle it. So I just kind of sat back and I thought, I kind of lead everything when it comes to new technology. So I'm going to sit back and watch and see what everybody else does. Well, then I waited like 9 months, and then I came in and I thought, okay, I'm starting to ask everybody what they're doing. Nobody did anything. So I'm like, really? So now I got to do this too? So anyways, I did all the investigation on it, and I think we're going to lead the way on this new platform.
It's good to be out
Very
front,
soon.
though.
Yep. I was busy. I was opening some new offices, and I thought, okay,
Let somebody else pioneer this
yeah,
one?
I'll just get some opinions on things. And then once I started digging into it, I'm like, okay, I need something that's really accepted, like nationally, and with all the underwriters and with all the counties. And I think it's more just a learning curve. Once I get all my closers up and running on that, it's going to really be awesome.
Do you see the application more for, out-of-state buyers and investors, or can you see your traditional John and Jane home buyer seller wanting to go that route? Because I feel like it's such an emotional transaction, and going to the closing table is sort of the pinnacle of the transaction. So I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah, I think it's gonna take a while for it to really get to that point. But I think, yes, your buyer that's out of state, or your buyer that's really busy, doesn't want to be bothered, doesn't really want to come to a closing. Any type of cash transactions or business transactions, those could all be done through that. The one thing that's held up right now is the buyer conforming new financing, because those big like Fannie and Freddie, they're just not ready for it yet with the promissory note. And so until they get that piece together, they're not going to be allowing those. But right now they still have kind of a hybrid closing. So what'll happen is they'll still have their closing appointment scheduled with me. And then some of the documents the morning of closing will be pushed to them, and they can e-sign them from their phone. And then they'll come in and sit down with me and sign the ones that I need to discuss with them. And then they still have to sign a little stack of what they call wet documents with real ink.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to upload those back to the lender. So to me, a hybrid is like more work, really, for me, because then we're like jumping in and out of these two platforms versus just whipping through a stack of documents.
Yeah.
But once they get over that hurdle, it's going to be really cool. Yeah.
How will things affect with the refinance market? Because lenders, are they able to do this as well, or just title companies able to facilitate the E?
I think lenders could too, but lenders are not title people.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of times they just don't want to get their hands dirty with that. Yeah. Especially if they have anything tricky on the title commitment. Like I have a bank in North Dakota. I do a lot of second mortgages, and it's more private banking, so bigger loan amounts. And anytime there's anything outside of just one mortgage to pay off on the title work, they want us to handle the closing. Otherwise, they close everything in-house. But a contract for deed or a trust, forget it. They don't want to do anything because that's not their expertise.
Well, I can certainly appreciate that as an investor, outsourcing the difficult aspects of the title process. I mean, it provides a lot of value, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and there's
Mostly
just so
I
many
don't want to do it
variables.
wrong,
Yeah, there's so many variables that could come up, because I could say, well, is it abstract or torrens? Are you married or divorced? Okay, what county is it? All these little things can play into how we handle that signing or how we handle that closing.
I probably did 10 or so contract for deed closings myself when I was the buyer back in the day, and trying to figure out how to do the ECRV and then present everything just perfect to the county exactly how they want it. I never actually got it done right on the first time. It actually got kicked back at least once, sometimes twice. And then there's that embarrassing moment where you have to go back to the other person in the transaction and execute new documents or, put something in you missed. And then as soon as I had it done by you guys, I was like, okay, this is worth the fee for just not embarrassing myself. So,
well, and there's just weird rules. Like they just changed the rule on state deed tax for the minimum. Well, how would you know that?
Right.
But I know that because we have to send stuff through recording. But I always tell agents when I'm working with them, I'm like, no kitchen table closings. And that's closings without me.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
So do you see any new opportunities or threats that have popped up in the title industry that you're kind of keeping your eye on?
I'm kind of keeping my eye on all of this Zillow stuff.
Okay.
But you probably know a lot more than that. But I don't think it's a threat for the title industry. I worry more about the real estate industry. But I'm paying attention because if I need to shift something, I'm going to shift it.
I would say the Zillow and all these, we call them like electronic or internet-based buyer type of organizations, I think they are a real threat to the realtor industry. In fact, when I gave my little 2020 address to the company, that was a big focal point is, we don't want to be flat-footed, waiting to see what happens. We want to be staying out in front of it and also pivoting more towards services that are more difficult to outsource. So, providing renovations and, just a little bit more of a concierge level service that you just aren't going to get from a call center in Taiwan or whatever. So
Right, but we still don't want to be Blockbuster Netflixed.
that's true.
Right, for sure.
You have to stay on that cutting edge. Even I was listening to the radio the other day, some kind of talk radio, and they were talking about this title. I don't know if you've heard those where it's like title spec or whatever, where they want you can call in and pay for a search to verify that nobody has stole the title to your house. I'm like, what? But I think it's because of all these fraudsters and things that go on. But I was like, what? What's up with this?
What is it, like the dark web commercial? That reminds me of like, see what your information is on the dark web, preying on people's fears, irrational or otherwise.
I know. Scaring the heck out of people.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, title search is important. I can definitely see it, but it's most important when you're making a transaction, otherwise.
Right. I don't see myself just like perusing through my house title records just to see what's up out there.
Exactly.
Did it get stolen?
Just for the sake of doing it.
Well, and if somebody stole it, you could always or if somebody did record some transfer documents that were illegal, you could always fight that.
Right.
But I guess that's probably what they're saying the coverage would be for. But it was interesting to hear that. I'm like, what? This is my industry. What are you talking about? Got to stay on top of those things.
I bet.
Yes. Something with the e-notarization as well. I think, every time I go into TitleSmart, I always feel that you guys like roll out the red carpet. There's always like a warm smile, welcome from the staff, all this kind of stuff. There's the gifts and the cookies and whatnot. So you really create like an amazing environment. How did you kind of develop that? Like through the years, or was that kind of like an intention from the start when you first started TitleSmart?
Well, I always liked it, and I did a lot of that at my other company, but not to this scale. And there was a lot of regulation in our industry from the Department of Commerce, places like that. And so I'm like, well, okay, I can't buy gifts for customers, like realtors and lenders, because I don't want there to be a steering type situation. But I can definitely share some of my favorite little trinkets with our customers, the buyer and sellers who are actually paying our fees. And so slowly but surely, it just kind of organically grew to be like, I really like this pink, so I'm going to make a keychain like that. Oh, I really like this calculator. Oh, let's get those, and so it's still happening like that today.
I got my favorite little TitleSmart swag of all time. The last time I was there was like a little key flashlight thing that you put on your keychain or whatever. That thing was bright. It was no joke.
I don't even think I have one of those.
I got it from the Woodbury office, and I'm serious. Like, it'll light up the entire darkness. I mean, it's crazy. So
Well, people send me like screenshots of different things, and so I'll just add them to my list of spring items, and then come the new year, I'll start kind of getting ready to roll out some different things, and then other things that are old, I'll phase them out.
you had a candy at one point too, right? Like a chocolate bar or something. I feel
We still
like.
have those.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right,
it's just like a
Like a-
wrapper that goes around a Hershey bar, and so
Yeah.
instead of the ingredients, it might show a list of all of our offices and 100%.
Oh,
nice.
Kind of cute, kind of
Yeah.
clever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is cute.
I'm working on a bunch of new stuff for 2020
I bet.
because it's 2020.
2020.
Kind of do some sort of like 2020 vision play on words, maybe. I don't know.
So how do you, so obviously with like the advent of like e-notarization, keeping that kind of like great atmosphere is probably going to be very important. And, being probably the industry leader, that'll definitely behoove you to, make more of an impact and kind of provide that better service. Is there like anything that you have ideas on to do that, or like kind of like how it,
How are you going to send
scales?
swag over the internet?
How you going to send swag over the internet,
Well, it might be just more about the experience with the
Yeah.
people. I want them to feel really connected. And actually, I've always wanted to be able to do a Skype closing.
Mhm.
Because otherwise, if you have somebody who's out of state or out of the country, we have to either send them a packet of documents with a bunch of these little sign here and notarize here post-its stuck there, and then information and instructions. And sometimes they go through everything and they're just blind. Or they may call during the process and they're like, what does this mean? And what does that mean? Well, this way I would be right there with them through the process. And some states like California, they charge every time the notary stamps the stamp.
Wow.
And so they could pay, $200 to have all those documents notarized, plus all their fees that they're paying to sell the house. So it's just a little different in different areas. And this would save all that. Make it much more customized. Plus, if the agent wanted to be there, they could. Or if you wanted, the husband and the wife were in two separate states, you could have them together on the signing session. There's just a lot of different things that will work. The one thing that I see is maybe the challenge is the technology. Because I know because of the photo and some of the resolution matters for all the documents and the ID verification, they cannot be on a phone. They have to be on a computer.
There's always some sort of thing
sure.
preventing it from going quite as smooth as it could. But
A couple years, that'll be resolved.
Yeah.
I've always thought the same is kind of coming down the pike for my side of the business as well, where purchase agreements, for example, there's no real reason they should be so scary to the consumers. If you had like almost like a TurboTax type of questionnaire where you just, what does it say here? And, you can enter in all the fields and stuff like that. That's what I think is actually kind of one of the bigger threats for my side of it is as consumers get more information and technology evens the playing field, how's that going to affect things? And so I think Zillow really is the one who is mostly responsible for evening the playing field. Even as a realtor myself, I use their tool more than I use the MLS tool. And it's the free one, not the one that I'm forced to pay for.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's crazy. Well, have you noticed lately with your closings with me, with TitleSmart, that you've been getting text messages?
I haven't been getting text messages.
So we rolled this out in December. And so you know how you get your appointment notification for the doctor, like a reminder?
Yep.
Well, we have a whole system now. They call it a pizza tracker. So in everything is electronic to the buyer and to the agent. Some things are by email, some things are by text message. But the cool thing is that they're getting reminders the day before closing now of their closing appointment and location. One of the biggest pain points in the closing industry is people showing up at the wrong place. Because a lot of times they'll get a letter in the mail from the title company telling them where to go, but they'll just look at the letterhead and not look at the actual information, and then they'll just drive there. Or they'll go to the office that's by their agent's office just because they just figured it was there.
Yeah.
So this way they're getting just a quick little blurb with just a tiny little information that they can just zone in on. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I bet.
useful.
Especially for our, are millennials. They love it.
Yeah.
They do love their text messaging. I don't
Yes,
know.
they do.
So, with you kind of spoke a little bit about some challenges with getting people. Is that like the biggest challenge, would you say, in the ongoing like day-to-day operations? Probably not.
With recruiting,
Yeah.
it seemed like in the last couple of years that it's really changed. I noticed this year we put out an advertisement for a specific type of clerical job. We got just a couple of applications for it. Usually we get hundreds. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, there you go. There's the shift. Because the job market is just, there's just so many people employed right now. So I'm noticing that. I'm still focusing on recruiting people at the entry level and training them up in my business right out of college. That's ideal for me.
That's always what's worked best for me too.
Mm-hmm.
It's, getting them while they're still in that learning mode and still very moldable, and their expectations for pay are a little bit more reasonable as well.
Yes.
I mean, if for us, for example, and I'm sure it's similar for you, when you're trying to recruit somebody who's a heavy hitter, they hold all the cards, like trying to get an agent, for example, who's in the top 10%. I mean, you better be ready to lay down for, whatever they want in order to get them over. So
Yeah, lay down and roll over and slide off the cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, plus people come sometimes with bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really nice to train people straight up. And I do love hiring people that have just kind of different degrees, unusual things. I think it's kind of fun.
Come to think of it, we've got a lot of unusual degrees around here. Yeah. Probably none weirder than Daniel's poetry. But he didn't even really, let's say he didn't get a degree, but he likes to remind me about his, one semester at Oxford or whatever. So.
Yeah. No, I do like that. My husband always says, honey, you are just like that lion on the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Island of Misfit Toys. Because I'll just bring all kinds of different people into our fold, and they just fit in so perfectly.
That's great.
Yeah.
So what's been probably the biggest challenge for you over the past 13 years? And what would be like a really great victory, do you think?
Oh, the biggest challenge, staff.
Yeah.
Recruiting. And not even recruiting's been pretty good. I would just say for me as a manager, because I'm still very hands-on, I work every day at my business, is just quickly enough identifying a problem staff member and eradicating that. Because a person who's not really on board with your culture can reap a lot of havoc, cause a lot of damage. And so that's been a big area of growth for me, because I'm always just like, oh, well, I really like them, but, we'll make it work. Well, I'll talk to them. And then I realized that it's just not worth it. And last year I had a couple of people, I'm not naming names, that I really felt strongly about that I had to let go of, and we parted ways. And then I looked at it 6 months later and I thought, wow, this rest of this year has been so awesome. Because you just didn't have that little, starting an issue over here, starting a little issue over here, gossiping here. Nothing. It was just quiet as a mouse. So I would say overall, my whole career, that has been my biggest challenge.
Same.
And carrying people's problems. Because as the owner of the company, if this person gets sick or has a family tragedy, it's up to you as the leader to care for them and to spread the word about taking care of things and to follow up with them. And I definitely want to do those things, but it's very heavy sometimes when you're carrying that for 100 people.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
You know what I mean?
I do.
But the business, that's great.
I feel the same way. Like the actual act of the business is the easy part. It's navigating personnel and issues, and how do you motivate people? How do you hold them accountable? How do you know if they're the right or the wrong fit? How do I know if I've trained them well enough? How do I know if it's them or me that's the issue?
And did you remember to ask them how their kid was that was just sick? Just things like that. You want to remember, but it's just hard to carry all those details and be perfect all the time.
Yeah, especially as you grow to, probably like 100 people or something like that, then you have so much more data and information to process,
Well, my husband and I, we were going to our company Christmas party, which we had downtown here. And on the way down there, he's like, why are you so quiet? And I'm like, I'm just preparing myself. Because for me, this is not a party. For me, this is work. Because I'm going to be here and I get a lot of joy from watching my staff have joy. But I have a lot of people who will be touching me and hugging me and talking to me. And by the end of the night, I'll be exhausted. I love it, but it still is exhausting.
For sure.
I get a little overstimulated sometimes.
Gotta have the quiet time.
I know.
Yeah.
Can appreciate that.
I need like my super shield.
Maybe take a Xanax. I don't know.
And take those like Skittles.
Yeah.
Ting.
So what do you think has been the biggest victory then?
Just knocking our goals against the wall and smashing them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just noticed it. I set this super lofty goal for last year. And my marketing team was like, how are we going to do that? And I'm like, well, I'm thinking we could do it this way, this way, this way. And I kind of just was a little bit vague. And I made sure that we met every month a couple times and just went over what we were all doing and just try to inspire them. And as we were getting closer to the end of the year, I'm like, geez, we might make it. And then I said, well, we might make our goal. I'm really trying. And then as we got in, it was like a week before the end of the year. And I emailed my accountant and I'm like, I'm trying to set my goals for 2020. I want to see where I ended up with my 2019 goals. And he emailed me back and we were like 60,000 away in revenue. And so I sat there and I looked at all the closings that were going to happen on the 30th and 31st. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we are going to kill it. And
Nice.
We did. We crushed it.
That's
So
amazing.
it was just really fun. It just made my whole weekend. And then great start to the new year.
That is nice. I mean, I've watched your business grow from that townhome one in Maplewood to, you got the headquarters and offices all over and, more and more staff. And it's been pretty impressive to watch the growth. I mean, I can only make assumptions about how it's going, but what I can see with my eyes is it's just you're proliferating throughout the metro. So
It's pretty cool to watch. I mean, I don't know.
I'd be proud of that for sure.
I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
I am. I always feel like I could do more. That's just the way it is.
It's hard. Sometimes you have to remove yourself from your own perspective and try and look at it objectively from the perspective of some sort of third party and not be so hard on yourself because anyone else would look at everything you've done and think, oh, wow, what a success and all that kind of stuff. And then people like us, we probably focus a little bit more about what we left on the table over here or that, could have done this better type of a thing. I have a little bit of that issue myself, but
Yeah, it's like, oh, I could have done more closings, or I
Mhm.
could have called this person back, or I should have spent more time in my branch offices, and I don't want to.
Yep.
There are days though, and I'm sure you do the same thing. It's like when I get to work at 8, it's like full on. By the time I get home, I just drop. My husband's like, you want to talk? I'm like, no.
Gotta get the
I
shield
don't
up.
want to talk. And then the next morning, after a night's sleep, I'm ready. But yeah, after a long day, it's like I need to recharge.
For sure.
How do you recharge?
It's funny because I'm a little bit different in that one regard because I'm going like a mile a minute, and then by the time I get home, I have a 45-minute drive to my house now since I live in the boondocks. But as soon as I get home, usually I want to just start vomiting all the thoughts and ideas and issues and whatever to Alina, and she'll usually tell me after about 15 minutes, like, okay, can we not talk about your work stuff now? Because, and then I have to try and switch gears from, being so hyper-focused at everything that I do here to being a father of young children. And I do need that little kick in the pants so that I can focus on, a 1, a 6, and a 12-year-old to make sure that I'm giving them everything that they need and not just so focused on myself and my businesses. So
I know, it's a tough challenge. We could add that to some of the toughest challenges list.
parenting.
Sure.
Parenting and just balancing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, when I get home, I want to hear about his day. Tell me a story. Tell me what happened today at the build out. But I don't want to talk about it. Sometimes I just need to process it and solve it, and then I'm ready later.
Well, great.
Yeah, that's it.
So do you
Great minds.
do you have any advice for people that are looking to get into business?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
I would say don't talk about it. Don't worry about all those little details and quit working and working and working to make everything perfect. Just get started. Just do it. And you can always just tweak things as you go. Slap it up on the wall and get going.
That's funny. The guy reads something, I forgot his last name, who started LinkedIn, said, if you're not embarrassed by the product that you put out at first, you waited too long, and I agree with that. Like everything I've done, I've only got probably 30 to 50% of it figured out before I get into it. And then you get, you take some bumps and bruises along the way, but you add that knowledge to it, and then by the third time or so, you've kind of got it figured out well enough. So
yeah, it's just like, if you want to invoice your first client, you don't really have an invoice. You have to make one. Well, just make one and get it out. And the next time you'll have a prettier one. And then a year down the road, you have a special software that makes a perfect one.
Yeah.
But you just got to go with what you have.
Yep.
For sure.
So
a lot of people get analysis paralysis. That was what my dad used to tell me when I was working with him as a business broker. He goes, you know how many people come through my door with aspirations of wanting to own a business, and then they start doing due diligence and looking into them and thinking, well, this isn't the perfect business. I'm going to have to keep waiting. And he goes, so many people just get stuck in that mode of thinking that there is a perfect this or and there isn't. Like everything's going to have a little bit of hair on it. You're going to have to figure it out, and you're going to have to put your own touches on it.
I think people like the hair. They do. People like just a little bit more originality and not everything so perfect.
For sure.
It's just a lot more genuine.
Well, I like doing what I call value add. I like taking something broken and making it great, just because I feel like that's where the value is, for one, is something that no one wants. And then on top of it, you get to be proud of the transformation that you were a part of. So.
I agree. It's like there's a need, and now there's a fix.
Yeah.
I like it.
Well, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to cover at all before we head out?
Oh, what about you?
No, this is about Cindy. I've already made it too much about me. So.
No. I'm like, I did think of something when we were talking, but now all of a sudden I can't think of it anymore.
Do you have any more books on the docket?
I have a lot of things in my folder that's called Book 2.
Book 2.
It's just a lot of ideas and things, but it's not really a career path for me. It's more of what my husband calls my expensive hobby. But it's just more of a passion. Maybe someday I'll just write, but
that's how you know the difference between a hobby and a business is whether it's profitable.
Right. And there's just it's really a tough gig to make it in the book industry, but I've been able to leverage my book by doing some small speaking engagements and just throwing the book into that, or we use it for marketing at the business. So
yeah, both of those books that I wrote and threw on Amazon and stuff, they were kind of a flop. I think I spent more money on getting it digitally converted and getting the book cover made than the actual sales pumped out from it. But it was definitely a half ego play, and then also just having some credibility out there and having a little link to your book and your email signature and stuff. People think, oh wow,
Right. And I think I just recently took mine off, but not that I don't want to sell my book, but I need to change the scenery.
Yeah.
Right. For sure.
I need to, I don't want to have the same signature line forever. I got to freshen it up.
I may say that you probably have the most elaborate email signatures I've ever seen. They're pretty and they're in depth and there's disclaimers and all sorts of stuff.
Not mine. Mine does have a little graphic on it, but yeah, I try to keep it as clean up because my kids will be like, "Mom, you sent me that email and there's like 15 attachments. I didn't know which one to pick." So then I went in and cleaned up my thing.
Like your little PNG files.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get our teams to just make one graphic with everything they want on it, so it just comes over as one. But
that'd be a good
it's
idea.
a process.
Yeah, consistency.
I never thought of that.
You keep learning. So, I don't know. We didn't really talk about social media, but I think that's a pretty big deal to keep up on. A lot of companies discount it, and I go to title conventions and different things and get ridiculed about it. But
why would you get ridiculed about it?
Oh, jeez, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, in my industry, which is mostly male-dominated, which doesn't bother me, but I'll go in there, and when I tell them that I know how to do a settlement statement or do a closing, they're like, oh, I don't have time for such things. Because I'm like, well, what do you do? Well, I run the business. I'm like, yeah, I run the business too, but I do this, and I run payroll, and I watch the HR, and I help with this, and I do all these different jobs. And I'm like, well, if you don't do closings, you don't do title exams, you don't work any job in the business, what do you do? But they don't have time for such things.
It's got to be hard.
Yeah, but I work very closely, even with Maggie, my daughter, and our marketing team on every single post that goes up, as far as like just ideas and philosophies. And I think that keeps things just fun and fresh. Yeah. But a lot of people discount it. They think, oh, even my son Alec, who's young, and then they're really into Snapchat and Instagram. And I'm like, yeah, but you need to put your video business, he has a video business, you need to put your video business content on Facebook. And he's like, well, I don't like Facebook. And I go, yeah, but the people who can actually afford to pay for your services are there. So you need to be there.
That's funny you say that. I always tell people too, I'm like, whether or not it's the most popular platform, Facebook is where the people who can afford our services are. And that's why we put most of our emphasis on it, and using Facebook Pixel and boosting posts and things like that. And understanding and leveraging social media has been very huge for VSM. That's part of our identity as a company. And I don't know, we don't have the budget for billboards and radio ads and the other types of things. Yeah, buses with bench just dudes going like this.
Yeah.
And YouTube videos, raps.
Yeah. Well, maybe I can do that.
But there's so many things that keep coming and changing, and if you stay up on that, like the stories. Yeah. People are really like that, and it's just kind of a quick little, oh, there they are. Just always in mind.
You know who's really good at social media over here too is Joe. I've noticed that he puts little personal anecdotes and questions and things, and it gets engagement from people. Sometimes, often, like double the engagement of some sort of marketing piece that we put together, and it surprises me. And I remember before Chris Lindahl became sort of the icon or whatever you want to call him that he is today, I watched him speak at this real estate mastermind conference a few years ago, and one of the things that he mentioned on social media that stuck out to me is he'll take a picture of like himself ice fishing and say, guess how much it weighed. And he said, I got like 1,800 responses with people guessing how much this fish weighed. And all I could think of is, I would have never thought of that. Like everything we do from a content perspective is a little bit more pointed. But then we noticed that we decided to put like blooper videos from our podcast, and those were a hit.
Bloopers are good.
People love like that personal stuff. I've almost come to the realization that the less you actually talk about your business, the more engaged the audience is. They just want to kind of deal with people and humans, not like just be sold or advertised to. So
yeah, and people like that personal stuff because like I have an Instagram, or my Instagram page is more the one that I use for my book, and so my marketing assistant runs that. So my daughter Paige goes, oh, no wonder why your Instagram is so boring.
Yeah.
And she's like,
is it impersonal?
Yeah, because it's just like, business. Mm-hmm. So I've started to go in now and add some of my own personal posts. Like I'm cooking this and I'm doing that. And those are the posts that get the most activity.
I also think showing some vulnerability and sort of that authenticity is huge too, because I've noticed that those tend to have higher engagement as well.
Yeah.
Because again, nobody wants to like just look at, how perfect your Ferrari and Rolex and stuff are. That doesn't quite get the...
No, they want to see you looking like crap.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, I think people don't like things that are overproduced.
Yeah. I would agree.
So that's why we got to just be like, during this podcast.
Well, we're so grateful to have you out.
Fun.
I'm glad that you were able to squeeze us in here, and
Oh, it's great.
Thank you so much. Is there for those listeners that really liked your story or want to reach out to you for whatever reason, how could they do so?
They could reach out to me through my website, which is cindykoebele.com, or just Cindy, Cindy, at TitleSmart.com.
Yeah, perfect. And we can have that
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
throw a little image over that so that people
Woo.
can get
Yeah,
in.
because Koebele is like impossible.
Mm-hmm. You could probably spell
Everybody,
it and they'd still get it wrong.
yeah, everybody at work just calls me CK.
CK. I like it. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for
Really
having me.
appreciate
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you all.